So good morning. Today we are going to talk about this week's podcast episode, which was on how to stand out with senior people. So who listened? Let me know. Give me a wave if you listened. Suzanne listened. WYC host 2 listened. I don't know what that's done. I could guess what that means. Katie listened. Sophie listened. And what stuck? You don't have to listen. Everyone who's new, you don't have to listen to the podcast to come to PodPlus ever. Diary Crush, I didn't do. Anyeka listened. Morning, Anyeka. What stuck, everybody? Let me know in chat. Anything particularly that stuck? I thought today what we would do is I'd ask you a few questions generally about senior people influencing your career, so we can share some knowledge, and then I thought I would go through some of the tips, see if you've got anything to build on, sort of bring it to life a little bit more. More as pithy is best. Don't write long emails. I'm not sure that just senior people should benefit from that. I feel like we should all probably edit a little bit before we press send. Understanding their challenges, being succinct. Yeah, not performing. Nina, I'm going to talk about the whole performance presentation mode a little bit today. Letting them know that something stuck with you from email. I wasn't going to mention that, Jane, so that's a good point. So Jane's the thing that stuck with Jane is the focused follow-up, which is, like when you're in a meeting with senior people and you're like, I really want to stand out to them, like avoid the saying something for saying something's sake thing. Really not helpful. But if you can do a focused follow-up, like I've reflected on what you said and I recently read this article that I thought you might be interested in, or that you don't want to do it all the time because it can be a bit annoying if you do it all the time, but the focused follow-up sort of shows that you've listened and adds value to something that they've said, and it makes you stand out in a different way than trying to compete for time in a meeting where there's already a lot going on. Lucy, bringing fresh energy to a long meeting. Yeah, I was not going to talk about that either. So that was the point when, when you're going to present, I don't know if you guys have done this, but when you're going to present to a group of senior people, it's a group of people in a meeting and you've got your moment, and it's just remembering that your moment in that meeting is one of many moments that they probably already had, particularly if it's like a day-long thing and they're probably just thinking, gosh, who's next on the agenda? But if they can go, hooray, look who's next on the agenda, because they know you bring the creativity or the energy or the ideas or whatever is authentic to you, like we all bring different things, but be that person who's the best bit on the agenda. I think, and sometimes that's not just what you're sharing, it's the way I think you share it. Like drawing, for example, if it ever works again. The Liz Wiseman tip. Oh yeah, the Liz Wiseman tip. That I think we're going to talk about, Simon, about the questions that you ask. So let me ask you some questions. I thought, I'd quite like to hear some funny stories that you might have had with senior people. And then I was like, that's not very professional, Helen. Ask a better question. But I mean, if you have got any funny stories with senior people, I'm all up for hearing them. But my more professional question first is, who is a senior person that has made a difference to your development, and how? I would love to know that. You will hear me all the time talking about Phil Gilbert, who is a senior person that made a difference to my development at Eon. I talk about him all the time on the podcast. He's a very brilliant guy, and he made a difference to my development because he gave, I always call him my manure manager. So not, basic, not because he put me in, but because he gave me a job I couldn't do yet, and then surrounded me with a lot of things that helped me to grow. So, he gave me lots of feedback. He gave me lots of training. He gave me lots of belief. And so I think when I think about, who do I want to be, that spotting people's strengths, building their belief, surrounding them with support is a lot of what I've learned from him. What have we got here? Someone who's interested in, I'm sorry, I'm catching up now. Someone who's interested in I've got some very annoying reaction thing that's popping up. Maybe if I give that a heart, it'll go away. Now I can read it. Someone who is interested in what we in the team want to learn and go, brilliant. My current manager, Claire, that's lovely that you've got a current manager that's doing this for you. She had believed in me from day one and wanted me to go for a role 3 weeks and starting in her team. My mentor sponsor the last 10 years who nudged me to go for leadership roles. Isn't it interesting? It's that nudge that puts you beyond where you are today, the difference that senior people can make for your development. My last boss, Will, says it gave me freedom of action and supported me. An old boss who asked me to seek forgiveness, not permission. There's a theme, actually, isn't there, already coming through in what I'm reading about these senior people that have made a difference to our development, have put us into positions that we might not have put ourselves into and given us the confidence that we can do those things. Quite interesting. Fanaz, I love that you've named David Waterfield, shout out to you. Believed in me and gave me support and let me present in very senior meetings. Yeah, creating the space. It's like support, space, opportunities. What have we got here? I'm scanning. A senior leader who shared their vulnerability. That's interesting. You know, when people share their failures, because we often see successes, right? But we only really hear about failures. So because the successes are the shiny stuff that you see. So it's quite interesting, I think, when people actually talk about when they made a mistake and what they learned from it. Sophie's current manager, it's brilliant. My first VP manager, Steve, said to me early on in my work with him that a problem needed solving. He wanted me to come up with a plan. Some in a meeting announced the plan without telling him. He said whatever, he told me what he would back my decision, whatever I said. Yeah, back to that bit of belief. Brilliant. Okay. There's more than I can read here, but I think it's brilliant. I think knowing, the reason I wanted to ask you is because I think it's just nice to read these things, but it's also interesting just to see what senior people can do for our development. Like, this is why we need to stand out with these people, because they are unlockers for our growth, spot opportunities that we might not be able to see, build our belief in ways that sometimes we can't do ourselves without that. So now, where you are right now, this is my second question. I was going to do annotation on the screen, but skip that. I'm going to ask you instead. My second question was, where you are right now in your career, what is it that you need from a senior person? And so some of the ideas that I was going to use as a bit of prompts in case it doesn't automatically come to mind was like, do you need mentoring? So do you need someone who's been there and done that, who's giving you advice? Do you need sponsorship? So someone who can advocate for you, open doors for your development. Maybe you just want some opportunities, like stretch opportunities. You're like, I know a senior person can put me in touch with those positions that can help me to grow. Maybe that's it. Or maybe there's something else. What are we looking for from these senior people? So lots of... Hello?
Silence.
Okay, I think probably that's something going on with tech. Feel free to interrupt me if that was intentional. Otherwise, I'll just keep going. So sponsorship coming up, navigating reorgs. Yeah, sponsorship. Mal's already got a couple of mentors. That's great. Sponsorship. Anything else? Trust and autonomy. Do not micromanage me. Sponsorship, stretch. I think it's important that can we explain sponsorship a bit more? Of course. So when we're thinking about the roles that senior people can play, mentoring is more of, think about that as someone who has done what you would like to do. So I might think in my career right now, I might think, okay, who has grown a business to a certain scale that I might be aware of? They could be a good mentor for me because they've done what I would like to do. So I can sort of fast track my development through the things that they've done. That's the kind of mentoring we're looking for. So I always think, who has done what you would like to do is normally the question I have in my mind. Sponsorship is more about who can open doors for my development. So when you're thinking about sponsorship, it's much more about advocacy. And I would think about who has got access and influence over an area that I'm interested in. That's what you're kind of thinking when you're trying to think about sponsorship. So I might be thinking, I'd really, really like to grow the Squiggly career sort of awareness in the US, true fact. And so I might think, well, who has got access and influence that could help me to do that? That might be someone in the media, that might be somebody, in large organizations that influence sort of culture. I might think, who's got access and influence over that stuff? They would be a brilliant sponsor for me. And just a side note on sponsorship, you can't just ask for sponsorship. So I can't just spot that person and go, don't say great things about me in America. I can't just do that. You kind of have to think about how you support a sponsor first. If you've got a bit of a knowledge gap around sponsorship, because it's a massive enabler for careers generally, I would look at Sylvia Ann Hewlett's work. She's my go-to guru in the world of sponsorship. She's written a book called Forget a Mentor, Get a Sponsor. Do not forget a mentor. It's just a good book title. Get both. But she's also been on our podcast before. So if you do not need another book on your shelf, then you can find the podcast episode that we did with her. And it might just give you a bit of insight into this area of sponsorship. Skill sharing. That's nice. Like a peer-to-peer thing with a senior person. Emily, that's lovely. I could see my mentor becoming a sponsor as I'm starting to give to her too. Brilliant. Brilliant. Okay, so there's lots of kind of mentoring roles. And my last question to you before I kind of go through a couple of the things we talked about and get any builds that you've got, is what's getting in the way? So you're quite, you've definitely had some past successes from senior people supporting your Squiggly career, and you're quite clear about what you want. I'm getting a lot of like mentoring coming through. So time. Interesting. Can't kind of get in their diaries. Oh, fear. Penny. I'll ask for you. Send them my way. I'll ask for you. Access. Yeah, feeling like those people are behind a bit of a barrier, maybe. Steve, very specific. And it's also like almost like an acronym. TAP. Time, attention, and politics. The TAP gap. I mean, there might be a podcast in that. I don't know. Who knows? Time. Their time or your time, do you think, everybody? Like, you've not got the time to ask, or you think they've not got the time to give? Their time. It is interesting, the time thing, that, I mean, it's a reality, right? Like everyone's busy, like you're busy, they're busy, everyone's busy, and you've got to kind of get on their agenda. But I bet one of the best bits of their job is helping people. Like most managers, like if you're a manager or a mentor, the thing that's most rewarding in the work that you do is like helping other people, probably achieving goals. Like lots of people and organizations want to achieve those results, but also making a difference to people's development is one of the most meaningful parts of people's job. So if you can find a way to be meaningful to them, which is the stuff that we're going to talk about now, it's likely that they will make time for you. So is the best bits. And just actually one side point on that, when someone does mentor you, so there are sort of two boosts that we get in our brain when we help people. Okay, so this is just worth having in mind when you're just thinking about people mentoring you generally. So the first kind of boost is the help that they give you, because people like helping people. I like helping you, you like helping your colleagues, managers like helping you. It's people like helping people. It's called the helper's high in psychology. So actually, if you can connect with somebody, they feel good as a result of helping you. It's like brain boost number one. The second boost, which is actually even bigger, and it's a really important thing to remember, is that when you like close the help loop, so when you go back to that mentor and you let them know about the difference their help has made to your development. So I might go to Steve and say, oh, Steve, thanks for spending time with me last week, just going through your top tips to help me in sticky situations when I can't solve it for myself. That has helped me already twice this week when my laptop died and I didn't know what to do, and I wouldn't have been able to recover as fast if you hadn't spent that time helping me. Steve's suddenly like, oh, Helen appreciates the effort that I spent with her, and it has made a difference. And next time she asks me for help, I'm much more likely to say yes. And so when you close the help loop, it actually means that you're more likely to get future help from that person. So it's a really, A, know that people like helping people. B, make sure you follow up with how their help has actually helped you, and then you're more likely to get it again in the future. So when I think about the people that I mentor, there's one particular person who always follows up with me with what she's done with the chat that I had with her. And I'm like, oh my goodness, if I spend more time with you, you just do even more good things. So of course I'm going to spend more time with you. So it just, and there's other people who you help and you never hear from again. And then I think, well, fair enough, but probably won't repeat that in the future. Okay. And so many time. Right. So I thought I'd just talk through some ideas, which I'm now just going to have to remember off the top of my head. I thought I would go through a couple of them in turn, see if you've got any builds, see if you've got any questions, and that'll be PodPlus today. So the first thing that I think is really useful is to make sure that you've got some quality questions in the bank. Because when you're like talking to senior people, sometimes like you don't really want to waffle through those moments, okay? And I think you want to make them think. If they feel like the same things they've always said, or stuff that they could have been put in email, it's not a great use of their time. But if you can ask them some quality questions that make them think, then I think that's quite a confident move from you, and it means that you are connecting with them, like, intellectually. So quality questions might be things like, what's the priority problem at the moment? Or what would a good outcome from this project look like for you? Like things that make them stop and think. What quality questions have you got? Like I can come up with lots for you, but I'm sure you can think of some for yourself that we can all benefit from. So maybe head into chat. What if you were trying to engage a senior person with a quality question? What would that be? Steve, what's keeping you awake at night? Yeah, really nice one. Again, if you're trying to, get some of that vulnerability creates connection. So that's often quite a good way to get some of that out. Yeah, what's on your mind at the moment? Lovely question, Jude. What's stopping us? Yeah. What constraints are getting in our way? What do you wish you had some help with? I love that, Katie. That's really nice. What would you like to be different in 6-12 months? Always a good one. I mean, they're effectively, these are like self-coaching questions that you're going to put to your manager. Like, we know these work because they're coaching questions. You're just using them in a confident way with a senior person. What can you see that we're missing? Yeah, or what might we be missing? What do you like about your role? What traits are essential for somebody in your position? What opportunity do you wish we had more time? That's lovely. That would definitely make someone stop and think, because very often we get stuck in like the doing trap, and a lot of the conversations get quite task orientated. So what opportunity do you wish we had more time to take up? Really interesting. Because can you imagine if they said something, we're like, oh, well, to be honest, I wish we had the chance to spend more time with, organizations who are doing this outside of our business. You could be like, oh, that's interesting. What if I went and explored that and found a way that we could do that? I mean, now you're their best friend, right? Because you've taken the thing that they want to spend more time doing and you've found ways to resolve it. If you could wave magic wand, what would you do? What excites you at the moment? Brilliant. I mean, save some of these questions, everybody. These are great questions. If you don't know how to save, it's the 3 dots in the chat at the bottom. But these are brilliant questions. Now, my second thing that we talk about on the podcast, and I think this was the Liz Wiseman point, but correct me if I'm wrong. That was also make sure that you know what your answer to those questions would be. So have some quality questions in the bank, but be pre-prepared with what your answer is. So ask yourself, what do I think? What do I think is an opportunity we're missing? What do I think I would do if we had a magic wand? What do I think might be missing from this situation that might get in our way? What do I think would help the organization in the next 3 to 6 months? If you are going to ask any of these questions of a senior person, make sure that you're prepared with your perspective. Because if they come back to you and go, I don't know, I've not thought about it, what's your perspective? And you go, I don't know, that's what I'm asking you. It's just a bit awkward. And you can even lead with it, right? You can lead with it and say, one of the things I'm worried about is that we might be missing this area on this project. I'd really appreciate your perspective on what you think. So you can lead with your perspective and then go into the quality question. But I think what you don't want to do is come across as a bit lazy. I'm just going to ask you these questions and I've not spent any time trying to think about it, because the last thing we want to come across is lazy, right? We want to come across as curious, confident, credible, ambitious. That's the stuff that we want these senior people to see, not I'm just going to outsource all this thinking to you. Any thoughts on that, anybody? What's the cost or risk of doing nothing? That's a lovely question, Fran. A nice one. Any thoughts on any of that? So be prepared with your quality questions, but make sure you've got your own perspective. Kind of point number 1. What else have I written down here? I don't know what that says. I can't read my writing. It was much neater on the screen. Avoid present mode. Let's talk about that one. So I think a really big trap that we fall into with senior people, and I've done this over and over and over, is being in present mode. When you get that moment, I think this is, well, maybe it does happen in one-to-ones. I think it happens more in those meeting situations where, you've got that time on the agenda and you're in your head, you're I want to come across really well because I want you to see that I know what I'm talking about. And, you do all that stuff, but you end up presenting. So you put the PowerPoint up, the presentation becomes the biggest thing that they're seeing. And they're probably thinking, get to the point. Okay, I mean, that's in most presentations. I think people are thinking, just get to the point. What do you want from me? What do you need? What value am I actually adding here? And so basically get to the point, avoid presenting. A lot of the time, that presentation could be put on a 1-pager. And you could send it in advance and you say, the conversation I'd really like to have in the meeting is this. It'd be helpful if you have time to read this in advance. Also remember that they probably haven't got time to read it in advance. So maybe just talk about the 3 points in the presentation that are useful to read after today are X, Y, and Z. But the main thing that I really want us to talk about today is, like, the more that you can go from presentation mode to conversation mode, the better it will be, because the value that they have is like what's in their heads. And if all you're doing is talking at them, you're not really getting into that. The confident thing to do is to have a conversation. So really try and think, how do I move from presentation mode to conversation mode when you're in a meeting with these people? Simon says, can be worth sometimes starting with the point and developing a conversation from that. Yeah, absolutely. Presentation mode depends on the person. Steve says, senior people I work with expect things to be phrased in a specific way. Others are much happier. Yeah, I think you're totally right. And Sarah's point on the podcast, because there are 10 ideas for action we talk about the podcast, and she basically started with, don't try and do all this at once. Like, yeah, I mean, I think don't try and do all this at once, and don't try and do all this with everyone, because to Steve's point, some of these things are going to be more appropriate for different people. And so I think you've got to work that out as well. What will work with that person? Which goes on to tip number 3. Are we on 3? Are we on 4? Don't know. Anyway, keep going. Find their filters. Really, really important with senior people to find their filters. Not everybody has the same filter for their work. Like, let's think about you. Like, you are the senior person that I want to stand out with. What do you think your filter is? Like, so my filter, for example, is like, is about pace, productivity. Like, if you want to stand out with me, help me do things faster, help me get there quicker, give me your ideas that help us to kind of improve and innovate in what we're doing. They are my filters. What are your filters? Like, if I wanted to stand out with you, you're a senior person that I want to connect with, what's your filter? What's gonna make you stand up and think, yeah, okay, like, she's somebody that I want to spend time with? Or what's your filter? Sarah's is sort of accuracy and achievement, like, help me win and help me get it right. Definitely, I like Sarah's filters. Honesty, so Steve's filter, like, give me an honest opinion. So imagine if you went to Steve, imagine there's a lot of noise going on in Steve's company, and you're kind of going, look, I'm hearing this, and I think it's important for you to know about it, because I think it might affect some of the things that we're doing. Like, that person's gonna listen, because Steve's filter is honesty. Ideas and positivity for Jude. How will it make a difference? Okay, so if I'm influencing Fran, I'm kind of making a difference is a thing there. Expertise, Angela. I mean, you can start to see things are quite different here, right? So if I'm trying to influence Angela, it's kind of the expertise that might help. For Steve, it's honesty. Action. Katie's all about the action. Yeah, help me take action. Whereas Alison's about method and maybe logic. Impact, what will it change? So yeah, really, really try and find their filter. I think you can find people's filters. It's very often in the language that they use. Like, so even like, look at an email, look at the length of an email, look at the words people use in their emails, listen in meetings. Not just to the general sense of what they're saying, but like the specific words that they're using in meetings. Like, I think we should explore this further. Like, that's somebody who's quite curious, who wants to get more information. I think ultimately we just got to get this done. Like, that's someone who's all about action. Like, just listen to the words that they're saying, and it can be really helpful to find their filter. Helen, that was basically my next process. That's brilliant. I'm glad. Last one, influence the influencers. This is a really important. A lot of you said about the time. It's really hard to get their time. I mean, sometimes that's just the reality, right? Like, I remember at Microsoft, like, there was some very senior people that I wanted to influence, and they, like, politically it was hard to get time with them. Actually they didn't have a lot of time. You had to go through a PA to get to them. So there were just a lot of barriers into getting into those people. And sometimes that is the reality. Doesn't mean you can't stand out with them. You just might need to do it indirectly. So I would, this is something that Sarah said that only I would do and she wouldn't, but this is what I would do. I would triangulate points of influence. Okay, so this might not be for you, but it might work. So take your senior person and imagine like a triangle around them. Who are the 3 people that basically they would spend time with, that would influence their thinking, that, you know, just spend more time talking to them generally. Who are those 3 people? And then think, how can you get to them? So influence the influencers. All the same stuff applies. You still need to find their filters. You still need to have a conversation, not a presentation. All the same stuff applies, but apply it to the people around the senior person if you can't get directly to them, because that means they're more likely to sponsor you. Your name's more likely to be brought up in conversations. They're, you know, when you're trying to get to that senior person, they're more likely to kind of endorse you. So sort of influence the influencers, basically. With all the stuff we've already talked about, you don't need new ideas. It's just new people to get you to the one. I also really liked Sue's point, be friendly with EAs, executive assistants. Yeah, really, really, really good point. Be very friendly with EAs, and they'll often put you first when there are requests for people's times. That would probably be tip number 11 that we should have put into the podcast this week. I think a lot of senior people will have an EA protecting their time for them, because while they're in all the meetings, it's the EAs who's working out, you know, what meetings get prioritized. So make friends with them, and it's more likely you'll get in their diary. Any other ideas? Last 2 minutes. Any other things like Sue's idea? Any other things that have worked for you with standing out with senior people? There are more tips on the podcast, but I didn't want to go through all 10. You can download the pod sheet if you haven't got time to listen. That's on the website, or obviously listen to the episode. But don't be a clone. Yeah, I love that, Andrew. Don't be a clone. Like, kind of what makes you different, what makes you distinct. We did talk on the podcast about sometimes talking about what you do outside of work can make you sort of more interesting inside of work. Definitely kind of getting away from the corporate clone thing there. Applying for roles with them and being interviewed by them. Yeah, that's interesting. It's interesting, Katie. Like applying for a role as a way of kind of being known by a person. Remember they are human too. I mean, it's a very nice note to end on, Jane. Remember they are human too. Smile and say hello. Yeah, I actually think that's probably helped me quite a lot. Just be like, hi, how's it going? Remembering information about them. You know, if they've got sports, like hobbies. Anyone listen to the podcast where I randomly go on about golf? I mean, that was a complete mistake. I don't know where I was going with that. I nearly did it again. I've never played golf. Crazy golf. I never played golf. All right, everyone. I think we are at time. I'm very sorry that it's not working. I'm going to bring out the hammer because I mean, I don't know what to do with this. We're at update 82%. So I've lost 8% in 30 minutes. So by the end of the day, maybe it'll be better. Maybe I need a new iPad. Who knows? I'm going to leave you to the rest of your day. Next week, we are talking about how to stop multitasking. So if multitasking is something you spend a lot of time doing, and maybe you've convinced yourself you're very good at it, apparently we're not. I think something like 0.2% of people actually are. The rest of us are task switching, and it's getting in the way of our growth. So if you would like to stop getting in the way of your growth, that's next week's. And I think PodPlus is on. Pretty sure it's on. Not sure if it's me or it's Sarah. I've got someone guarding my diary. So Louise will tell me. But hopefully we'll be back and see you next week, and have a good rest of your week. Everyone, see you soon, everybody.